Hello, I'm Malcolm West and welcome to this Project in a Box video session looking at maturity. So this is part 2 of the series we've been running. In part 1 we looked at an introduction to maturity, what the P3M3 framework is and how you work it and how you score it, and some basic ideas on how to improve maturity. In this one we're going to recap some of that, drill down into some more detail around some 3 quick win areas to get you to level 3, to the defined process type of level within the framework, and how you can practically implement that. So we talked about the broad themes of cultural skills and tools, ways of improving your maturity, and we talked about the fact that tools in particular are a quick win. You can get tools in, if you get the right sort of tools and they're addressing the right sort of issues, you can get them in nice and quickly and get to some quick wins under your belt in terms of getting up those lower steps on the maturity framework. Skills things take a bit longer, cultural things definitely take longer to get in, and you need those sort of things to get up to the really high levels. But the tools things you can get in nice and quickly, assuming you've got the right sort of tools, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So Project in a Box offers you broadly 3 things, 3 areas which are going to really deliver quickly for you. Providing consistency, so this is consistency in terms of process and defining those processes so they've got the things that you need, like starts and gates and ends. Documentation will be templated so you get in consistent content there, and configuration management in a consistent way to control all that for you. Consistency also actually in reporting, but we'll talk about reporting in a second. Controls, so establishing the standard controls that you're going to need to manage your projects and programs and portfolios potentially, plans, resources, finances, risks, issues, changes, benefits. Identifying those things, controlling them, managing them. And then the third area is communication. So this is making that information available to people in a sensible way, giving them reporting, allowing them to come in and run assurance and governance activities, audits, etc. Early warnings of issues as they're happening, risks as they're coming up, the ability to make timely decisions based on the information that's there, and establishing a good shared understanding of what's going on, consistent processes across the organisation, where you've got commonality of issues and risks, etc. Common resourcing problems, etc. across the organisation, as well as establishing best practice that's going to roll up and start to support some of the cultural aspects on which you can build from this sort of tools base. So let's go and unpick those in a little bit more detail. So the first one is consistency. Looking at the 7 perspectives across here, probably slightly less relevant for resource management, so we've picked on the other 6 as being focus areas for this. We can define in Project in a Box what we call a method template, and this gives you a prescribed set of processes for your project, usually with concept or idea phases, gates through the process, and an end review. So you've got some of those clearly important things in your perspectives identified there. It will set up all the standard templates that you want, and it will take people through which templates they're supposed to be working on at each point in the process. Again, very important in terms of governance, and audit and assurance, and establishing common processes and methodologies. Same with the guidance materials and placeholders, things you want them to collect, audit type information, approvals, etc. So all that just happens straight away. We provide 12 different method templates off the shelf: Official Prince 2, MSP, DSD Amateur, Agile Method, Praxis Framework, and a range of pre-scaled methods for less complex projects. And organisations can just apply that straight off the shelf and immediately have all that sort of framework in place. Different methods, different types of projects, all thought out, all consistent content, all provided for you straight away. Of course you can personalize that all if you want to and have your own methods, but many people wanting to make some immediate leaps up those frameworks can do that using all this material. It also sets up the sources of your controls data. You've got your standard templates in there for risks and issues and benefits and finances, etc., and it can standardize those and set those up into the reporting structure for you, as well as standardizing group access, so permissions controls for your stakeholders to access the projects if you want them to. Then we go on to think about the controls area. So we've already talked about establishing consistent templates for collecting that sort of controls information. We can do document management on those files, as well as any other files, our business cases, our PIDs, our mandates, emails that we're going to receive, etc. All can be managed in the system. Version control in those, we can see who changed them and when. We can search all that content as well. So that's really important in terms of being able to get to key bits of information. When we've got these standard controls though, we read that data into our database. So when you update your plan, check it back in, the system reads out all the tasks from it and stores them in the database. It does that for every project, does the same with risks and issues as well. And that means we can give people like team members their list of tasks that they're working on the project, or they're working on across the whole system. We can give program managers or portfolio managers the list of risks that are happening across the projects in their program or portfolios. And by giving people focus on the right sort of information and allowing them to run analysis on those things, they can start to find common issues. They can manage these issues in a more or perspectives in a more timely way. So decisions can be made quicker, less money and time is wasted doing things that don't need to be done. A key aspect of all this is by giving people access to this information in a very immediate, timely way, they can come and get it for themselves, subject to their permissions. And this saves the project manager from having to do mundane tasks. It frees up the having to remind people tasks due to start or finish, or asking questions for copies of plans, or can I have the latest business case, etc. People can go and get all those things. And saving the project manager from doing those boring, mundane, low maturity tasks frees up their time for doing the value added sort of things in terms of delivering their projects or programs or portfolios, and at building into those sort of cultural and important higher level maturity level aspects. So all of this sort of information is gathered together, and that's very important for you to be able to leverage off all those other things. You've got tools for grouping your portfolios together based on rules if you want to, or based on you just making choices about which projects are going to sit in which programs and portfolios, and also a set of approval processes and audit tools, audit reporting and audit notifications and reminders. Third aspect here is communications. So key thing is in terms of communications is ease of access. You've got multiple device interfaces for easy access, so you can access from a smartphone, from a tablet. We don't use apps, we use a browser, and that means you can access from any device that runs a browser. Very straightforward to do. We also have a Windows application as well if you want to use sort of slick desktop interfaces. Communications, key thing everyone always thinks about first is reporting. So standardized templated reports to enable you to deliver different sets of information to different audiences. Very important, not everybody gets the same report. Stakeholder, sponsor gets a particular type of report. Project team member gets a different sort of report. Auditor gets a different sort of report. So those focuses are preset for you, again, to let you get up those levels quickly. You can customize all that of course if you want to yourself later, but it's there straight away for you, as used by many people who have done this process before you. Those reports can work at the project level, at the program level, at the portfolio level. Live dashboards support that quick decision making. In terms of communication, this is all integrated with email, so you can send and receive content, you can store emails within the system as well. Indexed searching of content, so you can go and find where things are appearing in your project documentation and where and who added it or who updated it, etc. So that's really useful in terms of assurance and audit. The system is safe for supporting external access. What we mean by that is you can let your stakeholders come in, they can see the bits that you want them to see in the project but not perhaps everything, and that allows you to give access to partners and suppliers as well. The system's recording all your activity, so great for assurance processes, and automatic notifications mean that it will remind you when things are going to happen. It'll tell you when your task is due to start or when there's a new risk or issue added to your project. Really good for engaging people who are not necessarily working on projects all the time. So some really important areas there in terms of what Project in a Box is doing for you. So let's have a look at how that fits into our P3M3 assessment. So we've gone through and marked ourselves. This is, if you like, a self-assessment of Project in a Box based on how we know customers use it and what customers have fed back to us about the assessment scores they've been given once they've been implementing Project in a Box. So from a portfolio perspective, the portfolio model, it's pretty good. Probably a bit lighter in the resource management area here, and that's reflected in my comments of earlier. Very strong in risk management in particular. Some similar sorts of things at the program level, stepping up a little bit across organizational governance, management control, benefits management, because we start moving up into, rather than being defined processes at 3, more of a managed process there. And the resource management improves here because we can look at things across multiple projects into portfolios. Same sort of thing as we go through to the project level. Here we are very much in managed processes across all of these earlier aspects, and probably fairly similar to the program levels later on. So what does that mean in practice? In the same way as we did before, just leveling those things off, and that results in a 3.3 score. Looking at that, how that lays on to the various perspectives, so you've got the details there should you want them, and against models, and up to the 3.3 score. Now this, as I say, is a self-assessment. There is a bias in self-assessment, and studies that have looked at this say there's a self-assessment bias of optimistically of about half a mark. Half a mark, 0.6 of a mark, something like that. And I think that's probably fairly reasonable. A number of customers have said shortly after using Project in a Box they were at about just under a 3. So so that is about the same. That's probably a fairly consistent and honest sort of measure. And so many of our customers applying Project in a Box go to these sorts of levels from basically nothing. They haven't been using an established process, they haven't had established reporting in a consistent way, they've been kicking around the 0 and 1 levels, and they can jump straight up to 3s by applying the tool and applying those 3 areas we talked about: consistency, controls and communication. Now, why is this maturity aspect important, and why should you do a maturity assessment of where you think you currently are and then think about what tool that you want? So let's have a look at a sort of an analogy. Why does maturity matter? Here's our maturity model. We've got somebody who's not very mature, somebody who's a bit more mature, and somebody who is mature. And if we were thinking for them about what sort of car would be appropriate for them, then there's going to be some pretty obvious things leaping out at us here, isn't there? That it's a pretty stupid idea to put a small boy in a Ferrari, or perhaps even somebody who's just passed their driving test in a Ferrari, or perhaps even in an executive car. It's not going to be particularly clever to put a mature family person with a lot of stuff to move around, perhaps certainly not in a push car, and probably not in a small hatchback as well. And perhaps if they've got some you might think they'd fall into this sort of category. Perhaps if they've got some particular need, like they're into racing or very into cars and they've got the money to spend on it, they might go up to this top end. But you're starting to see a fairly obvious sort of matching up of maturities to the sort of tools that you might use for getting about. And the same thing applies to project management software. We've seen lots and lots of people. There are many horror stories out there of organisations who identify themselves as being low maturity. Well, we don't really do project management, and the way to fix that is to go and try and implement some full bells and whistles, does absolutely everything system, because you don't have the maturity to support that. You know, it's like putting a baby in a Ferrari. It isn't really going to be very successful because it's going to cost you a lot of money, it's going to take quite a lot of time to get it sorted out, and it really isn't going to match you very well. You know, the people don't have the skills and the understanding to be able to implement a tool like that. And if you've got a lot of skills and maturity, you probably don't want to be trying to run all your projects with a spreadsheet. That's not going to work very well either. But if you are currently using a spreadsheet and you want to go to some sensible mid-level of tools, then that's where Project in a Box can help you. And hopefully we've picked out some of those themes that draw that out for you and make that a pretty obvious thing, because we've got lots of customers who've started currently at a low maturity and we've leapt them up those scales so they can then start building on those skills and cultural aspects and start, moving on up again. And it's quite common for organisations running through this maturity scale that they leap up a level, and then that sort of establishes itself and re-baselines, and then they leap up again. And putting tools in is a really good way, if you put the right sort of tools in, of getting yourself up those first levels. So Project in a Box then, I'm going to talk in here about our multi-user platforms. This is Small Team Edition, 20 users for £1,000. You install it yourself. That's a perpetual price, so you pay it once, use it forever. And many people will start using something like this. If you're going over 30 odd users, you'll be using our Enterprise Edition, and you'll be paying per user. For that, again, you would host that yourself, and you can add as many users as you want to. And often people do that. They start in an area, then as they're growing up through their usage, they run up to Enterprise Edition and start adding some more users on. And that's a really good way of taking baby steps. You start small and work your way up. Live Edition is where we host all that for you, and there you pay per person per month for as long as you want to use it. So you can start and then add on users as you want to go, again allowing you to start with fairly small baby steps and then run on up through your implementation as you need to. So Project in a Box isn't going to break the bank either. You can do it really quite modestly. You can start and build up and go along as you need to. Now I'm going to say something which is pretty heretical to most software vendors. We have plenty of customers who, over our 11 years of running, who've started off with something like our Small Team Edition, and it's got them up the maturity step, and then they've said, well, actually it's not right for us anymore, we want to take some big leaps further forward, and they've stopped using it and got something else. But it's got them up to that stage where they're then capable of going off and using a bigger tool. And it's not cost them £1 million to do that. If they'd have tried the £1 million thing first of all, it would have just been a disaster. But because they've built up their capabilities, they can then move on up to the bigger thing. So this is a perfectly reasonable approach as far as we're concerned. Obviously we'd like people to use it forever, but they don't have to if they don't want to. So I hope you found that useful. That was the second set. If there's interest, we may go on and do some future ones looking at other aspects of the maturity model as well. But if you've got any further questions, do drop us an email, catch us up with us on Skype, or give us a ring, and we'll be delighted to discuss with you further. Thank you very much.